we're going to be talking about the whole Google memo with James Damore, and we're going to be talking about another side issue also with Vidme, and regards to how they're handling de-verifications and all of a sudden, limiting storage space and everything like that. So these are kind of like the two things we're going to talk about. And why we're going to talk about them is because, they kind of fall underneath the whole same thing. Is like, are we, is this the Orwellian 1984? Is this all of a sudden the diversity echo chamber, and all this stuff? Because these are the things that keep coming up in regards to this sort of thing. So let's go in and let's talk about let's go ahead and talk about like the whole Google thing first, because this is weird, because as creators, we're all creators here. We're sitting here having to go, it's like, okay, Google's worse, Vidme's worse, Google's worse, Vidme's worse.
And it just keeps going until it's like, okay,
yeah,
they're both worse in different ways.
You're all god awful, and I'm just trying to make funny videos.
Yeah.
That's where I basically stand on it now. After not just the stuff that's going on with Vidme, but the YouTube stuff, and now this whole Google memo thing. I'm like, really? This is the crap I got to talk about.
Yeah.
Like I'm just wanting to report on video games and anime, guys. Like, this doesn't even fall under our show, but everybody's talking about it, so of course we have to voice our opinion.
Yeah, and the whole diversity memo put out by James Damore, who was a Google engineer who then got fired, is a very interesting read. And the reason why it kind of needs to be talked about is because it talks about the culture within technology companies. So, Sean, did you read the whole diversity memo?
Oh, I've not gotten to like the reading the whole diversity memo, but I have like heard about like what people are basically summing it up to interpret it as. Got it.
So and that's the thing. I think almost everybody's heard about this week, unless you've had your head buried in the sand somewhere. And yeah,
exactly.
Which is not beyond some people.
No, it's not.
Some people willfully do that.
Yeah, some people are really good at burying their heads in the sand. But the thing is like we have Google and YouTube and everything like that. It's this huge giant of a technology company, all of it underneath Alphabet nowadays.
Yes.
And there are so many things, and it's also brought back up. Some of this has brought up a lot of secondary arguments, such as, is Google a monopoly? Nowadays.
Exactly.
So with the whole James Damore diversity memo, he made an internal memo called Google's Ideological Echo Chamber. So it talks about the biases and thinking about diversity and inclusion. Okay. And he's actually put it up there. He has citations to everything. James Damore himself has a degree in a master's in molecular biology. He graduated from Harvard. He's worked at MIT, and he's also
pursued a PhD.
Yeah,
this is a highly educated man, especially in the realms of biology and academic. So academically, he is capable of presenting his case quite clearly.
Yes,
exactly.
I will say that the information that he does have to support his claims, while he does link to it, it's not exactly cited in a way that makes it look like a citation.
True.
In my mind, so this is more of a streamlined kind of approach. But that said, I think a lot of the places that have reported on this document, a lot of people that are discussing this document probably haven't read it, or if they did read it, they didn't finish it completely.
Yeah, or some of the outlets have done some injustice. Like I think it was like Motherboard or Gizmodo. It's like they published the document technically in whole, but with their own interjections at certain points. They left out the cited sources and everything like this.
Other places have claimed it's a manifesto or a screed.
Yeah.
and or are just taking bits and pieces out of it to support their own narrative in a way that will incite viewers to share the article around and click on the advertisements.
Yeah.
This is them hacking you guys.
Pretty much. And one of the reasons why he ended up writing this this ideological echo chamber thing for Google is they're talking about like diversity and sensitivity training and things like this, but when they have these diversity meetings, if you are not considered part of the if you're considered part of the problem, you are not allowed to attend these meetings. And so it's basically it's like when they're talking about like minorities, they have the meetings, and minorities and that sort of thing are allowed to go to the meetings. But if you're considered the majority, you are not allowed to go to the meeting. Yeah. So you have these biases in the company that what he considered kind of illegal, which is why he put this thing together. And
well, keep in mind the other thing is James Damore shared this memo internally. It didn't really get out until it started sparking a lot of controversy within Google itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like his first intention was not to make this a public thing.
Yeah.
Yet.
But then it kind of internally went viral amongst people inside Google.
Yeah.
And it leaked out.
Yeah, because I mean somebody was basically outraged. And a lot of the one of the things he talks about is Google's political bias has equated the freedom from offense with psychological safety. But shaming into silence is the antithesis of psychological safety. Basically, his argument is, we're trying to make things so that words, people are going, words are violent, words are offensive, words cause harm. But when so we want to make this an inclusionary, safe environment, but by shunning people's ideas and not allowing them to speak, you are also creating an unsafe space at the same point.
An unsafe work environment.
Yeah, and so you end up getting this group think where somebody, if you say something counter to the group think, you are all of a sudden offensive and being violent with words, and that causes problems, because then you may not see a problem or an issue that needs to be solved, or you might just be completely sideswiped by that problem because nobody was willing to voice their opinion on it because it could be considered negative and violent. So people are basically, some ideas become too sacred to even be discussed honestly, and then he ends up talking about the big thing that got in trouble was the biological differences between men and women, and a lot of it is, he's flat out tries to preface this and say, look, I'm for basically, we got to look at everybody as individuals. Let's, we should not be discriminating. I do not like stereotypes. I'm not saying anything about that. But the problem is like when you're looking at things, it's on averages, there are stereotypes and everything like that, because you're looking at an entire group versus the individual. And he tries to make that distinction even in his argument. But
it really seems like it's an inconvenient truth kind of argument. It's like the difference between people asking for equality when what they really want is equity.
Yeah.
So, in this sense, while he does point out that there are in fact biological differences between men and women, it is a physical fact. It is a scientific fact.
Yeah.
He does make a statement around those points that says that he's not saying that women can't do the jobs.
Yes.
He's not saying that that they are disqualified from anything for any biological reason. He's just saying that they are less predisposed to these jobs. Yes,
and he even looks at some things because I mean it's one of those things you're looking at the whole situation. So typically in STEM fields, and he even says it's like millions of dollars have been poured into STEM, and yet we're not seeing this increase with women joining the fields. But at the same point, he says, you need women for things because of biology. They have a tendency to be more feeling versus men typically are more analytical and more care about things. So it's like, while the men are better at the programming, you still need the women to say, no, that's, it's like the guy's programming. It's like, great, I made a new interface, but you still need somebody to be able to say, hey, this interface just doesn't feel right, doesn't flow right, things like this.
Well, even within the document, there's no definitive statement that says that, men are X, women are Y. It's, on average.
It's all on average.
It's all on average, or it's all within statistical mean, within likelihood, higher likelihood, or higher disposition. It's never a definitive statement of black and white.
You're right. It's not.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
but it's like one of those things where he's kind of talking about that, and he uses that sort of example because of on average. The
major problem I have is most of the media coverage makes it seem like he made this black and white, women are X, men are Y kind of statement, when he really put out a document saying this is the inconvenient truth. There are differences that need to be acknowledged. Making them as a part of diversifying, singling out or what's the word, excluding the majority for the sake of diversity actually hurts the company as a whole.
Yeah, and that's
Exactly.
that was one of the things in that document too. Is what was it? What the bias is? It's like discrimination to reach equal representation is unfair, divisive, and bad for business. And the funny thing is, I think actually my daughter actually pointed this out. Is Google actually has an over-representation of minorities, but yet they're still trying to get more inclusive, and it's weird how those numbers work with all this. But all this comes out, and you can look at the diversity memo. You can go to diversitymemo.com now to actually read it yourself.
It is hosted there in full with references.
Yeah. And you may not agree with everything, in it.
But if you're going to be making a statement on it, you should read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is coming out of this is, there's some inconvenient truths, like women have been able to break out of their box more, versus men are still stuck more in their box, where if they try, it's like, it's one of those inconvenient truths where if men try to do things that are typically have been considered by society to be things done by women, they get poo-pooed on, or they're not allowed to do them by society. Versus if a woman's doing things that men have typically done, they are praised.
They're praised. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing, and it really is an inconvenient truth. But I don't necessarily want to get into everything about it.
It's a really tough thing, and it really is.
It is.
It comes down to a personal interpretation and how you feel about that directly.
Yeah.
Even at this table, there are differing views, so it's not like we can come to an agreement on this. Other than the major problem here is James Damore made these statements in an internal memo. It got out publicly. It made its way up the ladder, and he ended up being fired.
Yeah.
For this document.
Yeah, because apparently he supposedly violated, workplace regulations with this document and everything like this.
Because he made certain statements within the document that were not, that did not align with Google's beliefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it upset people, and that's the thing is, if you have a differing opinion, you're going to probably upset somebody, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
And in some aspects, and it's the whole aftermath with all this, because he's like, look, conservative opinions are typically suppressed and everything like that. It almost, by firing him over this inconvenient truth, or this uncomfortable truth, or this uncomfortable discussion, it almost makes it so that his document is right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, there's things like people are saying that this is violence with words, and we're upset, so we're not going to be going to work, the next day because we've been hurt by this document and by words, so we can't go into work. and yet it reinforces the document at the same aspect, in some people's eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
keep in mind, this document, like I said, it's very well written. It's very academic. With a little extra work, it could actually be a PhD thesis.
Yeah.
Or showing up as part of a peer-reviewed journal in some cases.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just a matter of the wording and the way that it was disseminated that really became the issue. And then when the media got a hold of it and the way the media has been presenting it,
they've been presenting it in a very biased manner.
It's very ugly.
Yeah. So we have the media presenting it in a biased manner. We have Google firing James Damore, seeming bias, and on top of it, he's looking to now sue Google for the firing being unethical, and violating workplace rights. And the other weird things that have come out of this, and this is where it starts to go completely nuts left field, is you have there was an article in Slate that said we need to stop believing science. And I just went, what? So they go, oh no, we can't hold up science as something that's right or wrong nowadays. I mean, Sean, science, it's okay to to question it, right?
Yeah, it is okay to question it.
But science is usually dealt with things that are, whether it's
concrete realities.
Yeah.
So the scientific method basically takes something and tests it over and over and again until
they figure out what is the reality.
Mm-hmm. And it's what is true and what is accepted as proven fact, proven theory. Not necessarily a scientific fact is almost a misnomer. It's almost a what do you call it? What's that thing that's
you lost the word?
Yeah, like military intelligence.
Military intelligence. Oh, yeah. Oxymoron.
Yeah, oxymoron.
So
scientific fact is almost an oxymoron. These things are tested, and it has to hold up within the scientific theory. And even then, something will come along later and completely destroy that way of thinking.
Yeah, and science can happen because there's starting to be a little bit more bias with science too, and that's the thing. As people are going to question, they're going to scrutinize things and everything like that. But for me to hear something come out of this, like the Slate article, this is stop equating science with truth, and they're saying like evolutionary psychology is just the most obvious example of science's flaws. But the people that are arguing, saying that James Damore's, who has a master's degree in, biology, his stuff is flawed, and we can't believe the science behind it and everything like that. This is the same side that says you have to believe all the findings behind climate change. So
yeah,
it's like, you're basically, by making the argument, you're saying that, they're saying that the biological sciences are not science, and this is not truth, even though science is always evolving, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of tricky. It's almost like they're saying we believe in science but don't believe in science at the same time.
We believe in the science that we feel is right. Is what it comes down to.
Exactly.
And it is perfectly fine to refute a misinterpretation of the facts, but you cannot deny that the facts exist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you can interpret those facts however way you want, but it's still there in testing, in results. Men and women are biologically different. Even if you break it down and say that they're still human bodies, the bodies are still different.
Yeah.
The equipment is still different.
The structure of the body is different.
It's always different because men and women have different biological roles.
And on that same point, climate change is happening to some degree. You can refute the numbers.
You can refute the interpretation. You can refute how it's reported. But the fact that our society, doing the way it is, being industrious as it is having an effect on the climate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And depending on how you even look at it, if you're saying global warming or global cooling, there is still climate change, no matter how you look at it, so, but to just go, well, I just don't agree with this science, we're just going to throw it out. It's dangerous, you know.
That makes you look closed-minded.
Yes.
And
that's the thing. And
it doesn't serve any purpose other than to support your own narrative.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of times throughout history that science has been wrong, and something's come out later as science has evolved to prove something right. I mean, come on, we went from like a flat Earth to a round Earth, but of course you still got those people that still think flat Earth exists.
Flat Earth.
Yeah. So, you know, with all this, it's very dangerous, you know, hearing this whole narrative where somebody basically puts out an inconvenient truth and gets fired over it, you know. And it's really...
I really think that what happened with him being fired, and this is probably what the court case is going to end up really highlighting behind closed doors, Google had to fire him because he created such a hostile work environment for those members of the diverse population at Google. But whether it was his intention or not, it was the interpretation of his memo. It was the conversation that his memo incited and the environment that it created in the minds of the people working there that made it so Google had to make some sort of way to be like, okay, the monster is gone, you're all safe again.
Yeah. Well, I can see that argument. The counter argument to that is, on the other side, Google themselves is making an illegal, hostile, exclusive work environment by having these meetings on diversity and minorities and not allowing everybody to attend.
Yeah.
By basically internally segregating, they are creating an illegal work environment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then with all this, you know, we find out towards the end of the week, James Damore's fired. He's doing interviews with more conservative outlets and everything like that.
He's getting job offers from WikiLeaks and Gab.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and
Julian Assange actually made a public statement saying censorship's not right. He's basically got a walk-in position at WikiLeaks.
It'd be interesting if James Damore ended up at WikiLeaks or Gab next. You know what I mean?
That would be. And Gab is doing the alt-right tech alliance now because of this.
The alt-tech alliance, which is basically like a group of people who are done with like censorship of like people just for like disagreeing with like one's point of view.
Yeah, and you know, it's like even like Colin Moriarty.
Alt Tech Alliance?
Yeah, the Alt Tech Alliance. And then Colin Moriarty, who had worked in Silicon Valley and part of the industry and everything for a while, even said, yes, there is a huge bias towards progressiveness and a more liberal mindset, and it is very hard, and there are people that live vicariously through him at times, because he even got in trouble and lost his job because he made a joke where he made a joke with that when he was at Kind of Funny on A Day Without Women, and said, peace and quiet, you know, hashtag A Day Without Women, and the outrage that came down on it, and he ended up leaving Kind of Funny and started his own thing. But at the same point, he goes, yes, there are strong biases, and this is not good. It should be based on merit more so than anything else, and finding the best candidate versus just going, we need to diversify, because then you potentially get weak candidates, because then you're looking at the diversity first versus what they can do second.
Versus their like qualities.
Right.
And whether they're good for the job.
Well, there was a company that basically like they got called out because they didn't have a diverse enough work force, and they said we hire based upon merit.
Yeah.
If people who qualify for the job apply, they get the job.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that really matters when it comes to hiring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I mean, if you look at that, that's there are so many examples of businesses that are very biased, or just the industry it's in is just naturally biased, because you know it's like firefighters, policemen,
construction, mining.
Yeah, those are typically biased towards they're dangerous jobs that typically men go into.
Plumbing, HVAC.
Yeah, but women can do those jobs too. But the problem is that women typically don't seek out the education in those jobs.
Exactly.
You know, but you can't force it either.
Yes.
And that's the thing. And when it comes down to an individual level, what they want to do is
it's completely up to them.
Yeah. and this is what comes down to some like the stuff with like the silencing of things, and even towards the end of the week here, Google was going to have a staff meeting in regards to this whole. They're going to have a town hall staff meeting in regards to James Damore and this article and the firing and everything else, but James Damore started blowing up so much, and he started a Twitter account, got up to like 50,000 followers, like insanely quick. And Google cancels the staff meeting because they're afraid of the potential backlash of doxing and a Gamergate style attack.
There's a blast from the past.
That's
Gamergate.
Yeah, and this is the insanity behind all this week is they're afraid is basically this progressive agenda is afraid of words, afraid of violence and everything like that, word wise.
Yeah, they're afraid of what could happen, and they're not looking at what the benefit could be of having like a town hall meeting and like getting to hear others' words. You know what I mean? Even those who you don't necessarily agree with all the time.
Yeah,
it's my personal opinion that it is ideologically weak to silence someone. There's a quote from like Game of Thrones or something. It's like cutting out a man's tongue does not prove that he is worth silencing. I'm paraphrasing here, so he's worth silencing. It proves that you're afraid of what they're going to say.
Yes.
And in the end, I mean, if it, being able to communicate, being able to have a conversation means that both parties are able to present their cases. To deny somebody the ability to state their belief, to state their opinion, because it is contrary to your beliefs or because it hurts your feelings, is not a proper way to conduct society or civilized business or discourse.
Exactly.
People have to be able to make the statements, have those statements refuted, and if you're able to support those arguments with fact, then you'll have a stronger case than just, oh no, what you're saying offends me or it's harmful.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when you log into Vidme now, what you see is a personal feed.
Yeah. Of like more recent videos, and then like on the side, it almost the way it's laid out kind of reminds me of Reddit. It with the icons.
Yeah.